Mention war and peace in casual conversation, and it immediately serves as cultural shorthand for an impossibly dense, intimidating mountain of a book. The statistics alone are daunting. It spans roughly 1,200 pages and tracks a cast of over 580 distinct characters. The author, Leo Tolstoy, offered no help in making it easier to categorize. He stubbornly refused to classify the work as a traditional novel. He insisted it was not a poem, and he explicitly rejected the label of a standard historical chronicle. But people who actually attempt to read it usually encounter a glaring contradiction. Instead of a grueling academic slog, they frequently consume the entire massive volume in a matter of weeks, reporting that the narrative is highly addictive and almost impossible to put down. The French novelist Gustave Flaubert wrote to a friend that reading it caused him to utter shrieks of delight at its profound psychological depth. Virginia Woolf finished the text and immediately declared that its execution proves Tolstoy is the greatest of all novelists. Ernest Hemingway explicitly studied the book to learn how to write honestly, objectively, and starkly about the physical realities of combat. So how does a sprawling, genre-defying behemoth actually work on a mechanical level? To hold together a narrative of this size and become the pinnacle of world literature requires a highly specific architectural structure. Tolstoy's structural genius relies on a concept called architectonics, the structural design of a highly complex system. In the text, he executes rapid shifts from a massive, macro-historical perspective down to the microscopic minutiae of everyday domestic life. The peace half of the narrative functions as the micro-perspective. It tracks 15 years in the lives of 5 aristocratic Russian families as they navigate marriages, finances, and crushing societal pressures. Within those families, we follow 3 primary anchors: Pierre, a wealthy, awkward intellectual desperate for meaning; Prince Andrei, a deeply cynical nobleman; and Natasha, a vibrant, impulsive young woman experiencing high society for the first time. The war half of the narrative provides the macro perspective. Here, Tolstoy establishes the terrifying, sweeping scale of geopolitics as Napoleon Bonaparte invades Russia with an army of 600,000 men. Tolstoy constructs the narrative around a deliberate, violent collision between these 2 absolute extremes: the sweeping geopolitics of an empire and the fragile interior lives of his characters. Tolstoy drops ordinary human consciousness directly into the unimaginable chaos and sensory overload of continent-spanning 19th century combat. By grounding the reader in these moments of interior panic and confusion, Tolstoy captured the psychological wreckage of combat, including symptoms of what we now call post-traumatic stress, decades before a clinical vocabulary existed for them. At the Battle of Austerlitz, we see the fight entirely through Prince Andrei's perspective. He enters the military desperate for Napoleonic glory, but in the middle of the fighting, he is struck and severely wounded. As Andrei lies bleeding on the battlefield, he looks up at the infinite quiet sky above him. In that moment of physical vulnerability, his military ambitions and the pursuit of glory suddenly seem small. Tolstoy then shifts the narrative scale back up to the macro destruction of the Russian nation. When the invasion reaches its peak, we witness the cataclysmic, visually staggering burning of Moscow as the city goes up in towering flames. The horrific scale of the war acts as a crucible. It violently strips away the characters' superficial aristocratic concerns, leaving them with no choice but to confront the raw, unpolished reality of their own existence. Tucked into the dense philosophical epilogues of the book is Tolstoy's ultimate thesis. He mounts a total rejection of the great man theory of history, the widely held academic idea that a few highly influential individuals dictate the course of human events. This passage highlights that military leaders do not orchestrate historical events, but ride chaotic waves of unpredictable variables. Under this logic, an anonymous soldier holding a line or a peasant sharing a meal has exactly as much impact on history as a general shouting orders. We see this democratic vision of history play out in the final resolutions of the core characters. Andrei finds peace only when he lets go of his ego, and Natasha matures through a brutal process of profound loss and survival. Pierre experiences a specific revelation. After surviving imprisonment by the French, he realizes meaning and a connection to God are found in the simple, everyday act of living, rather than in high society or grand politics. Tolstoy presents history as a vast, living tapestry, woven by millions of these small, ordinary human connections and moments of endurance. War and Peace remains a monumental achievement because it frames its grandest geopolitical chaos as the backdrop for a much more intimate journey, the everyday struggle of figuring out how to be human.